when we see people making stuff up about us, it means they're scared. Well, when Mr. Del Duca and Mr. Ford are making stuff up about me, I got them on the run.
Not on the run. They better watch out. So you're thinking about voting for the Ontario NDP? No worries. Today we're going to show you what their platform is offering you. Hey, welcome to News You Can Use. I'm your host, Brandon Gomez, and before we give you any more details, I need you to do a few things, like subscribing to this channel, tapping that notification bell, smash the like button, and don't forget to follow us across all of our social media. The details are in the description below. So we have invited all of the major party leaders onto the show. Just want to put that out there. Many of them have said yes. We're still awaiting for one particular answer, but today we are bringing on Ontario NDP Leader Andrea Horwath to explain what the NDP is offering voters for this election. Let's bring her in. Leader of the NDP, Andrea Horwath, thanks you so much for joining me here on the BG Show and News You Can Use. How are you?
I'm really great, Brendan. How are you?
I'm doing really, really well. I know that you've been out there across Eastern Ontario surveying the damage from that crazy wicked storm that we had recently.
Yeah, I'm here in Peterborough, and I was around the town with the Mayor Diane Therrien, and our candidate Jen Deck, and it's pretty devastating. It's caused a lot of damage, and it was really, really scary for people to have that storm come through and create such a devastating result. It was awful.
I want to talk to you because we're about a week away from Election Day. So where do we stand? Are you going to be the next Premier of Ontario, or are you running to be the opposition leader once again?
Oh, I'm definitely running to beat Doug Ford and become the Premier of Ontario, because Ontario deserves a Premier that works for you. The people of this province deserve a Premier that works for you, not a Premier that works for his buddies, and not a Premier that's focused on their own party and their insiders, but a person that goes to Queen's Park each and every day, rolls up her sleeves, and fixes the things that are most important to Ontarians.
All right, well, I want to get into the platform because we do have a few themes, but I'm also going to ask for your cooperation in not attacking Doug Ford. I'll ask you some questions about him a little bit later on at the end of the interview. We just want to hear about the NDP's platform and what their plan is for the people across Ontario. So let's talk about cost of living and affordable housing, because when we posed the question to our audience and we asked, what do you want to hear from Andrea Horwath? They wanted to hear the plan about cost of living. We know it's expensive, affordable housing crisis, price at the pumps. So what are the three main priorities the NDP has to tackle and fix the increasing cost of living in Ontario?
Well, we have a couple of plans. First and foremost, we're going to freeze taxes. There will be no increase in taxes for middle and low income Ontarians. We're going to ask those at the top, the big fish, if you will, to pay a little bit more to help us make sure that everybody else can afford to live in Ontario. We have a housing plan that builds 1.5 million houses, but houses that are affordable, that are entry level, that are the starter homes, so that young people can get their foot in the door in the market. And on the housing file, we're also going to bring rent control back, because even rents are completely out of control. But there are also other costs that come out of everyday people's pockets that we know really cause a financial burden. So everything from dental care to making sure your prescription drugs and your mental health care can be purchased with your OHIP card instead of your credit card, as well as things like auto insurance and gas at the pumps. The other, so you don't want me to talk about the other guys, so I'll talk about what I'll do. I'll be the only Premier in this province that stands up to the insurance industry and to big oil and gas.
So what's your plan for car insurance? What does that look like for people, especially people in like the 905, I think Brampton, where they pay some of the highest car insurance in the entire country? What's your plan to fix that?
Well, there's a couple pieces, but the first one is we'll definitely immediately ban postal code discrimination, which we know has impacted the people of Brampton quite a bit. So we're looking to a 40% reduction in the price of auto insurance. And we're putting a task force together that will look at the different models that will get us there. And we're going to ask them to look at whether we can achieve that 40% just in the existing private market. But at the end of the day, we're going to change up our insurance industry in this province so that people can afford to buy the insurance they need to drive their cars.
Well, speaking about cars, I mean, everybody knows that the price of gas is at crazy record levels. People all across the province are struggling to get by. Some can't even afford to go see their family members because of how expensive it is. Is there a plan to fix that? Can we even fix that? Like, be real with me on this one.
Well, I think there's nothing more real than what was just done in the US when a bill was passed to stop gouging at the pumps. They passed, the House of Representatives passed a bill that would actually take on big gas and oil. And that's not something that anybody here in Ontario is prepared to do except for the NDP. And so our plan is to outlaw gouging at the pumps so that we don't have that gouging happening right before a long weekend, which we know has been going on forever, but also capping both the retail and wholesale price of gas, allowing for appropriate profits, but making sure that people get a fair shake in terms of gas prices.
Okay, let's talk about transit fares, because a couple of your competitors, including the Liberals, they've promised to reduce transit fares for the next 2 years to just $1. The Ontario Green Party, they're promising to slash transit fares in half for several months. Is there a plan from the NDP to match that? Because I mean, that sounds enticing if you're a transit user and you can't afford to fill up your tank.
Yeah, the transit affordability is a big issue as well for us. But one of the things we want is a long-lasting change. We don't want a gimmick. We don't want something that you just put on a leaflet that you can take to a door. What we want is real change in terms of how we fund transit services in our province. And so we've made the commitment to upload, so not download to municipalities, but take on the costs of 50% of the cost of operating the transit systems across the province. Why? Because that allows municipalities to bring down fares and stabilize them for the future. But it also means that it will help them to be able to increase the frequency and the number of stops, like the geographic area that transit is serving in their municipalities. We need to get more people out of their cars and onto transit. We can't do that without helping municipalities make that service better and more convenient for people and more affordable.
Alrighty, let's talk about the COVID-19 recovery, because there are a lot of people who remain unvaccinated, and with the world somewhat going back to normal, there are still employers who have those mandates in place for their employees to be vaccinated. Where do you stand on this? Do you feel like employers should drop those mandates, or do you believe that they should continue to keep them in place?
Well, the part of the problem that we had here in Ontario is that there was a free-for-all, and there was no leadership, and so people and companies and employers were able to, or were not just able to, but were forced to, make those decisions on their own without any real guidance and rules from the province. And so everybody approached it differently. But what we've always said, and what I believe, is that when it comes to settings where people are vulnerable to the contracting of COVID-19, as well as the worst kinds of symptoms and real serious health outcomes, we need to make sure that we're masking and that we're making sure people are vaccinated.
So you're talking like the healthcare system, long-term care homes. You support mandates still in those areas of employment.
Absolutely, and we also had hoped that we would have done the right thing in this province and kept masks on in the schools a little bit longer. That's what parents were looking for. That's what school boards were looking for. But unfortunately, in a rush to take those masks off, we've ended up with some communities having significant spreads of COVID-19. These things can be avoided if we had just tried to be a little bit more thoughtful about taking the masks off in schools.
All right, let's talk about schools and students, particularly post-secondary students, because a lot of them want to know, well, you know what, like my OSAP got cut. I'm dealing with a lot more debt now. What is the plan? Which party is going to help me get out of all of this debt, especially in Ontario, which has, I think, one of the highest post-secondary, like university or college tuition rates in the entire country? What's the NDP's plan for students?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Our kids are leaving post-secondary with debt the size of mortgages, and that's preventing them from taking on other parts of life. I mean, we talked about housing already. It's so unaffordable, but when we add on the cost of post-secondary debt that people are carrying, it becomes impossible for young people, to even begin to build their life. So we have a number of plans in that regard. We're absolutely going to get the interest off of student debt. The province shouldn't be making interest off the debt of students. We're going to turn loans into grants so that you won't have to be accumulating debt. Your loans will become grants, but at the same time, we're going to fund the universities and colleges and make sure that people are able to access trades training in a way that is responsible.
But why not
You were
just
right.
cap? Why
You're
not
right
just
about
cap tuition rates though? You know, we've been hearing that a lot from students. Like, why don't we just have a cap? Like, why does it increase like every year at these drastic rates? Why not just say to the universities, no, you can only cap it at this amount, $6,000. That's it.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. And we have Quebec is a good example of a province that's actually kept their tuition rates lower by doing those kinds of things. You're right about the debt, but we also have the lowest per capita funding of our universities. So per student funding. So the money comes from somewhere. The reason the tuitions are going up, tuition's going up is because the universities and colleges aren't being funded by the provincial government. So the way to keep tuition down and you cap it and start reducing it is to fund universities so that they can provide the education, the degrees, the master's degrees, the doctorates, without having to gouge the students to pay for those services, to pay for that education.
All right, let's talk about mental health and the healthcare system, because I know that you guys, your party just recently put forward a specific plan related to students and mental health. We did speak with Mike Schreiner from the Ontario Green Party. They were the first party in this province to have a specific platform dedicated to mental health. I did read a bit of your guys' mental health platform. It resembles it a lot. So why would a voter choose NDP over the Green Party when it comes to mental health?
Well, you know, Mr. Schreiner's telling a little bit of a tall tale when it comes to the mental health piece, but that's okay. That's all right. I'm okay with people borrowing our great ideas. But in fact, our mental health plan is a serious one, and we've been talking about it a lot. And literally, I'm here at this lovely little setting in Peterborough on a waterfront or a riverfront park. Pathway, and literally a young man approached me just before this interview to tell me how worried he is about mental health for himself, as well as a number of young people in his age group. And I would say he's in his early 20s.
So what are the three highlights?
The pandemic has shown us just how important it is to address mental health. Mental health care is just as important as physical health care. Highlights are you pay for your mental health care with your OHIP card, not your credit card. So affordability, huge. And accessibility. Right now, depending on what community you live in, you may or may not be able to even find mental health supports. So we're going to do that as well. We're going to expand the access to service, the community-based programs that have huge wait lists now. We're going to have an immediate influx of funding to try to help to clear those wait lists, and we're going to make sure that we're training up social workers and nurses and family docs. We will cover the cost of their training to be able to provide the therapies and counseling that people need.
Okay, so we talked mental health, healthcare. You've been in Brampton a lot talking about a third hospital. Why is that so important for you?
You know, when we watched as hallway medicine took over in Ontario, the government was squeezing hospitals and not funding our hospitals, firing nurses. But in Brampton has been waiting for equal access, equitable access to healthcare for a long time. They got promise after promise after promise, government after government after government. They were a very fast growing community and relying on one hospital. So we will do a couple of things. We will absolutely make the Peel Memorial Centre a full-fledged hospital with a 24/7 ER and acute care beds, something that let's just say another candidate running for re-election as the premier has reneged on already, but also a third hospital and a regional cancer center. Why? Because Brampton was ground zero for hallway medicine. Literally thousands of people every year waiting in hallways to get the care that they need with no dignity, with no privacy. And those workers in the hospital there at Brampton Civic, they did their best and they worked really hard, as did the administration, but they were not given the resources they need or the attention the people of Brampton they needed from both the Liberal and Conservative government.
Okay, and then for the rest of the province, in terms of healthcare, what does that look like under Premier Andrea Horwath?
What it means is that we will be providing the funding that hospitals need to clear the surgical and procedural backlogs that we have, some 20 million backlogged people, surgeries, procedures are now in the on the waiting list, which are growing instead of being cleared. We have a real crisis when it comes to staffing in our healthcare system. So we're going to get rid of Bill 124, the low wage policy that we have now that's chasing people out of the healthcare system.
Would you do that immediately? Would that be done immediately?
Absolutely. It's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to get rid of Bill 124 and invite the people who have left to come back to our healthcare system, but also make sure that those internationally trained professionals, thousands upon thousands of them, 15,000, and just when it comes to registered nurses, are able to get accreditation here in Ontario. We have a plan for recruiting more workers into healthcare, making sure that we retain those workers with fair wages and good working conditions, and bring some of the people that have left, especially those nurses that, for example, have a lot of skills, a lot of experience, a lot to offer, to help us with the training and the mentorship that we need to get our nurses back on the job and to keep those young nurses on the job as well.
Okay, we have to talk about the rise of racial discrimination, racism across this province. I did talk to Mike Schreiner about it. He was talking about, we need to move closer and closer to legislating, an end to racism and criminalizing those type of acts. Do you support that?
Well, what we've actually done is we've put together something called the Our London Family Act. And I was happy to see that Mike Schreiner supported that legislation that we brought forward. Unfortunately, the government of the day didn't support it, which is pretty shameful. But it stems from that horrifying attack against the family in London that lost their lives with a truck driver a driver of a truck who just literally mowed them down in an Islamic hateful terrorist attack. So the action is in that bill, and it's everything from making sure that we're resourcing our anti-racism directorate better, that we have a minister responsible for anti-racism, that we're creating the stats necessary to ensure there's accountability. We need to tackle this head on, making sure that there are safety zones in places of worship. And so we have a lot of work to do in our school system as well, which is part of that bill also. So we do have a roadmap to start tackling this. And I really hope to get the opportunity to do exactly that. It's extremely important.
I appreciate your answer on that. I really do. I want to talk about the promises. I know that you said at the top of this interview that one of the ways that you're promising no tax increases on the middle class, but for the big whales, you said a bit more. They would have to pay a bit more. Is that enough to fund all of these promises, though? Like on the real talk, because people do wonder. Like the NDP says a lot of good stuff. They promise a lot of good things for this group of people. You name it. But really, is there enough money to fund all of these things?
Yeah, there absolutely is, Brendan, and you probably have heard a number of times over the last little while that we have an economy that's growing in leaps and bounds, and that's an important thing. The problem is the big fish. Did you call them whales? The big fish at the top of the food chain are the ones that are getting the benefit of economic growth. And what we're saying is that those big fish are going to have to pay a little bit more. But what we do have is a well-costed plan. And what I will guarantee Ontarians is that I will be responsible with the province's finances. And some of our plans are, they pay for themselves in many ways. So for example, if people aren't showing up to emergency wards to get their root canal done, to get a tooth pulled, then because they have dental coverage with our plan, then that takes pressure off of hospitals. Our plan absolutely is costed. It's available. People can go and have a look at it online. And what our plan says is for these first couple of years, we have to help everyday people have some hope again. We have to have everyday Ontarians should be able to afford everyday life in this province. And right now we can't. People feel like they want to be back on solid ground again after COVID. And the only way we can do that is by investing in them. And that's what our plan does. But it also commits to, in the second term, in the beginning of the second term, getting down to a balanced budget, because that's what people expect, and that's what we're planning to do.
All right, I'm going to ask you a few really quick, candid questions, and I want your total honest answer. Out of the three other parties, out of the four, including yourself, Who lies the most?
Who lies the most? Okay, well,
Mm-hmm.
this is something that I have to confess to, is that I have said probably more in these last 4 years than ever before, that the Premier of Ontario is making stuff up again.
Who?
And
Who's that? Who
so
that? Who that? Who
that would
is
be the
that?
leader of the Conservative Party, who is constantly making stuff up.
You can say
And
his name now, by the way. You can say his
I'm
name.
allowed to say his name. Okay,
Yeah.
we're in that part of the segment. Okay, I
Yeah.
gotcha. Yeah, Mr. Ford makes stuff up all the time. But I was shocked today to have Mr. Del Duca making stuff up about the NDP plan, and that's just not fair for people. You know, people should be able to expect that that we're pretty straight up with what our offer is, and that's where we're headed. But I can tell you, when we see people making stuff up about us, it means they're scared. Well, when Mr. Del Duca and Mr. Ford are making stuff up about me, I got them on the run.
Not on the run. They better watch out. Listen, who would you grab a drink with out of the other three leaders? You know, Doug Ford, Stephen Del Duca, Mike Schreiner. Out of the three, who would you want to grab a drink with?
Well, I don't think it would be Mr. Ford for sure. We're just too far apart on so many things. But I would have to say that I've gotten to know Mike a little bit. We spent some time in the opposition side of the legislature, and we chat from time to time. He's an awfully nice guy, and so I could handle that. If it was St. Patrick's Day, it'd be even better because it'd be green beer.
My last question for you, Andrea Horvath, and it's just yes or no. But if Doug Ford is, let's say the PCs win a minority, and you know the Liberals and the NDP have a certain amount of seats, would you guys ever do an arrangement like what we see with Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh?
Well, what I want to say is that I'm going to wait for the people of Ontario to make their decision before I make any decisions of my own, because this election is about them, and it's
So
about
it's not an
giving them
outright
hope.
no.
It's about giving them hope and knowing that there's only one party that can do that. The Liberals didn't do it when they had the chance. The Conservatives aren't going to do it. They're not going to fix the things that the Liberals broke. We will. And what I can guarantee is I would never support Doug Ford. I've said that many times before. I just disagree with him completely on every front. But Ontarians have to get rid of him first. And that's the challenge ahead, which is why some of the things that the Liberals are saying, quite frankly, and even Mr. Schreiner is saying are kind of risky. What we need to do is come together this time. Come together, beat Doug Ford, and your best shot at doing that is with an NDP vote. And you'll also get decent health care, mental health care, dental, affordability, housing, and we'll be able to do that with a very prudent and thoughtful fiscal plan.
I gotta tell you, Andrea Horwath, you are one convincing person.
Well, you know why? Because I believe and I know in my heart and my soul that we can change things, that we can make things better for everyday people. But going back and forth with the same old way with the governments that we've had in the past are never going to get us there.
Alrighty, well, thank you so much for your time. A week away until Election Day, so good luck. Where are you going to be, by the way? Are you going to be in Hamilton or are you going to be in Toronto on Election night?
Probably Election night, I'll be in Hamilton.
Okay, alrighty. We'll let the people them know. You take care and good luck on the rest of the next week. And thanks so much for joining me on the BG Show and UCK News.
Thank you, Brendan. Nice to see you.
Hey, BG Squad. Thanks so much for checking out our channel. And listen to this. We have more great content for you, like this video right here and this video right here. By the way, don't forget to subscribe to this channel right now and tap that notification bell.